"Don't let them find me," she pleaded. The outlaw had no idea what he just walked into. She thought he was gone until he returned. For her, the gunshot shattered the morning silence before Katie could even scream. Glass exploded from the window above her head as she dove behind the wooden counter of her small general store. Her hands trembled as she reached for the shotgun her father had left her, the one she swore she would never need in this quiet Arizona town. "Katie Miller, I know you're in there," a gravelly voice called from outside. "Your man ain't coming back to save you this time." She recognized that voice. Dutch Morgan. The outlaw her fiancé Jake had testified against 3 years ago. The same man who had sworn revenge before they dragged him away in chains. Katie's heart hammered against her ribs. Jake had left 6 months ago, heading north to Montana for work. His letters had stopped coming 2 months back. She had convinced herself he had just forgotten about her, moved on to a new life. But now Dutch was here, and that could only mean one thing. "Jake's dead, sweetheart," Dutch shouted, confirming her worst fear. "Caught up with him in Billings. Now it's your turn to pay for what he done to me." Katie checked the shotgun. 2 shells. Dutch never rode alone. She could hear boots crunching on the dirt outside, circling the building. At least 3 men, maybe 4. The back door was her only chance, but it opened into an alley with no cover. She would be dead before she made it 10 feet. "I'm giving you to the count of 10, Dutch called. "Then we're burning this place down with you in it." Katie's mind raced. The root cellar. There was a small crawl space that led under the neighboring building, something the previous owner had used during the Apache raids 20 years ago. She had never been down there, had always been too afraid of the dark and the spiders. But fire terrified her more than anything in that cellar could. 1, 2, 3. She moved fast, throwing open the trapdoor near the back storage room. The smell of damp earth hit her as she climbed down into the darkness. 4, 5, 6. Her dress caught on a nail and she yanked it free, hearing fabric tear. The crawl space was ahead, barely visible in the dim light filtering through the trapdoor. She could hear Dutch's counting getting louder, angrier. 7, 8. Katie threw herself into the narrow tunnel, crawling on her elbows and knees, dragging the shotgun beside her. Dirt filled her mouth and nose. Something skittered across her hand and she bit back a scream. 9, 10. The explosion of breaking glass and the whoosh of flames igniting made her crawl faster. Smoke began filtering into the tunnel. Her store, everything she owned, was burning above her. Katie emerged into the cellar of the abandoned restaurant next door, gasping for air. She could hear Dutch and his men laughing outside, could hear the roar of the fire consuming her life's work. She climbed the cellar stairs and peered through a crack in the boarded window. Dutch and 3 other men stood watching the flames, passing a whiskey bottle between them. Their horses were tied to the post outside the bank across the street. Katie's fear transformed into something cold and hard. They thought she was dead. That gave her exactly one advantage. She checked the shotgun again, then noticed the rifle rack on the wall. The previous owner had left 3 rifles behind, all loaded. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12. She had been good at it once. The men were still celebrating when Katie kicked open the door. Part 2, Katie's first shot caught Dutch in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. His bottle shattered on the ground as his men scattered, diving for cover behind water troughs and posts. She ducked back inside as return fire tore chunks from the door frame, splinters cutting her cheek. "She's alive!" one of them shouted. "Dutch, she's in Murphy's place." Katie grabbed a second rifle and moved to the side window. She could see one of Dutch's men crouching behind a barrel, his gun trained on the door she had just left. She took careful aim and fired. The man yelped and fell backward, clutching his leg. Not a kill shot, but he was out of the fight. "Get her," Dutch roared, his voice thick with pain and rage. "Burn that building, too." Katie's advantage was disappearing fast. 2 men were still mobile, and Dutch was wounded but not down. She needed to move. The restaurant had a second floor with a better vantage point, but the stairs were exposed. She would have to risk it. Boots thundered on the wooden sidewalk outside. They were coming from both sides, trying to flank her. Katie ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. A bullet punched through the wall beside her head, showering her with plaster dust. She dove through the doorway at the top and rolled behind an old dresser. The main street. She had a clear view of Main Street. The town was empty. Everyone had fled or was hiding. No one was coming to help her. Dutch had made sure of that by arriving at dawn when only Katie had been awake to open her store. She saw movement below. One of Dutch's men was creeping along the side of the building, carrying a torch. He meant to set this building on fire, too. Katie steadied the rifle on the windowsill and exhaled slowly, just like her father had taught her. The shot echoed across the empty street. The torch fell from the man's hand and he crumpled to the ground. "You killed Hank," someone screamed. "Dutch, she killed Hank." "Then kill her," Dutch snarled. "What am I paying you for?" Katie moved to the other window. Dutch was behind the water trough across the street, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. The fourth man, the one she had not accounted for, was nowhere in sight. That worried her more than the ones she could see. A creak behind her made Katie spin around. The fourth man had climbed the back stairs and was standing in the doorway, his pistol aimed at her chest. He was young, maybe 20, with scared eyes and shaking hands. "Drop the rifle," he said, his voice cracking. Katie slowly lowered the rifle to the floor. Her shotgun was leaning against the wall behind her, but she would never reach it in time. The young man stepped closer, his gun never wavering. "Dutch wants you alive," he said. "Says he's got plans for you before he finishes this." "What's your name?" Katie asked, stalling for time. "Don't matter," the young man said, but his eyes flickered with uncertainty. "It matters to me," Katie said softly. "You don't look like a killer. You don't look like you belong with men like Dutch Morgan." "Shut up," the young man snapped, but his gun hand dropped slightly. "You don't know nothing about me." "I know you're scared," Katie said. "I know you probably got mixed up with Dutch because you needed money or protection, or maybe you just didn't have anywhere else to go. But this doesn't have to be how your story ends." I said shut up. The young man's finger tightened on the trigger. A gunshot cracked from outside, but it was not aimed at the building. Katie and the young man both froze. Another shot, then another. Someone was shooting at Dutch. Katie dove for her shotgun as the young man turned toward the window. She rolled and came up with the weapon raised, but she did not fire. The young man was staring out the window, his mouth open in shock. "Who is that?" he whispered. Katie moved to the window, keeping the shotgun trained on the young man. Her breath caught in her throat. A lone rider was charging down the main street at full gallop, firing a revolver with deadly accuracy. Dutch and his remaining man were scrambling for their horses, returning fire wildly. The rider wore a long duster coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. Even from this distance, even after 6 months, Katie recognized the way he sat in the saddle. Jake. He was alive. The young man beside her lowered his gun. "That's Jake Cooper. I heard Dutch talking about him. Dutch said he killed him in Billings." "Dutch lied," Katie said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's horse thundered past the burning remains of Katie's store. He fired twice more, and Dutch's remaining man fell from his horse, clutching his chest. Dutch managed to mount and spurred his horse toward the edge of town, but Jake was faster. He brought his horse alongside Dutch's and launched himself from the saddle. Both men hit the ground hard and rolled in the dust. The horses scattered. Dutch came up first, drawing a knife from his boot. Jake blocked the first slash and drove his fist into Dutch's wounded shoulder. Dutch screamed and staggered backward. Katie ran for the stairs, the young man forgotten behind her. She burst out onto the street and ran toward the two fighting men. Jake had Dutch pinned on the ground now, his hands around the outlaw's throat. Dutch's face was turning purple, his legs kicking weakly. "Jake, stop!" Katie shouted. "You're going to kill him!" Jake's head snapped up. His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something wild and dangerous in them. Something she had never seen before. Then recognition flooded his face, and the wildness faded. "Katie," he breathed. Dutch used the distraction to knee Jake in the ribs and roll away. He scrambled to his feet and ran for his horse, moving surprisingly fast for a man with a bullet wound. Jake grabbed his revolver from the dirt and took aim, but Katie put her hand on his arm. "Let him go," she said quietly. "The law will catch him. You came back. That's all that matters." Jake lowered the gun and watched Dutch disappear in a cloud of dust. Then he turned to Katie and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar smell of leather and sage. He was real. He was here. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. "Dutch said he killed you." "He tried," Jake said grimly. "Put 2 bullets in me and left me for dead in a ditch outside Billings. But some travelers found me, got me to a doctor. Took me 4 months to heal up enough to ride and another 2 months to track Dutch here. I got your letters. I'm sorry I couldn't write back. I didn't want Dutch to know I was alive, didn't want him to have any warning when I came for him." Part 3, Katie pulled back and looked at Jake's face. He was thinner than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes and a jagged scar along his jaw. His eyes held shadows that had not been there before, the kind that came from looking death in the face and barely escaping. "We need to get you inside," she said, suddenly aware that they were standing in the middle of the street surrounded by bodies and burning buildings. "You're hurt. I can see you favoring your left side." "Old wounds," Jake said, but he winced when he moved. Dutch's bullets did more damage than I like to admit. "But I'm here now, and that's what counts." They walked toward the hotel at the end of the street, the only building still intact and safe. The young man from upstairs had disappeared, probably fled when he saw his chance. Katie did not blame him. She hoped he would find a better path than the one Dutch had led him down. Sheriff Ben Carter emerged from his office as they passed, his face red with embarrassment. He was an old man, past his prime, and everyone knew he mostly kept the peace through conversation rather than confrontation. "Miss Katie, I apologize," he stammered. "I was checking the cells in back when the shooting started. By the time I got my gun, you had the situation well in hand." "It's fine, Sheriff," Katie said tiredly. "Just help me get the bodies off the street and arrange for the fire brigade. What's left of my store needs to be put out before it spreads." "Yes, ma'am." Right away. The sheriff hurried off, grateful to have a task that did not involve facing dangerous outlaws. Inside the hotel, Katie borrowed a room from Mrs. Patterson, the elderly owner who had been hiding behind the front desk during the entire shootout. Jake sat heavily on the bed while Katie fetched water and clean cloth to check his wounds. "Take off your shirt," she said, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. They had been engaged 3 years ago, but 6 months of silence had created a strange distance between them. Jake unbuttoned his shirt slowly, revealing bandages wrapped around his torso. Katie carefully unwound them, revealing 2 ugly scars on his left side. The wounds had healed, but not well. She could see where infection had set in and been fought back, probably more than once. "The doctor in Billings said I was lucky," Jake said quietly. "1 bullet missed my lung by 1/2 an inch. The other broke 2 ribs, but did not puncture anything vital. But the infection almost finished what Dutch started. I spent 3 weeks in fever talking to ghosts." Katie cleaned the wounds with gentle hands, applying fresh bandages from Mrs. Patterson's medical supplies. "Why did Dutch come after me? He got his revenge on you." "He should have just left town and disappeared into Mexico or somewhere the law couldn't reach him." "Because he's crazy," Jake said flatly. "I sent him to prison for robbing the Denver bank. He did 3 years hard labor, and it broke something in his mind. When he got out, all he could think about was making me suffer. Killing me was not enough. He wanted to destroy everything I loved." "So he came for me," Katie finished. "I knew he would," Jake admitted. "That's why I rode hard as soon as I could stay in the saddle for more than a few hours. I pushed my horse until it nearly died, then bought another and pushed it just as hard. I had to get here before Dutch did, but I was 2 days too late." Katie tied off the last bandage and sat beside him on the bed. "You were not too late. You came exactly when I needed you." Another 5 minutes and Dutch would have had me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened settling over them. Through the window, Katie could see smoke still rising from her burned store. Everything she had worked for since Jake left was gone. The merchandise, the account books, the small savings she had hidden in the back room, all ashes now. "I have nothing left," she said softly. "Dutch took everything." "You have me," Jake said, taking her hand. "If you still want me. I know I left for 6 months with no word. I know you probably thought I had abandoned you. If you've changed your mind about us, I'll understand." Katie turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. This man had ridden hundreds of miles with bullets wounds still healing, had tracked a dangerous outlaw across 3 territories, and had arrived just in time to save her life. How could she not want him? "I never stopped wanting you," she whispered. "I was angry and hurt and scared, but I never stopped loving you." Jake pulled her close and kissed her, gentle at first, then with growing intensity. 6 months of fear and loneliness melted away as Katie wrapped her arms around him. He was real. He was here. They were alive.
A knock at the door interrupted them.
Sheriff Carter stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to disturb you folks, but we got a problem," he said. "Dutch Morgan's man, the one you shot in the leg, Miss Katie. He's been talking. Says Dutch has a brother named Cole who's supposed to meet him in Sunset Ridge tomorrow. Cole's bringing 10 more men. They plan to take over this whole territory, use it as a base for their operations." Jake stood up carefully, reaching for his shirt. "How reliable is this information?" "Pete's scared enough to tell the truth," the sheriff said. "He knows Dutch is going to kill him for failing. He wants protection, wants to turn witness against the whole gang." "Sunset Ridge is 20 miles north," Katie said. "If Cole Morgan and his men don't hear from Dutch, they'll come looking. And when they find out what happened here, they'll come with violence on their minds." "The town needs to be evacuated," Jake said. Get everyone out tonight. Women and children first, then the men who can't fight. Send them to Silver Creek. It's 40 miles east, but it's safe. What about us? Sheriff Carter asked. What about the people who stay? We prepare, Jake said grimly. We turn this town into a fortress, and we make sure Cole Morgan regrets the day he decided to follow his brother's path. He had come back for her, had saved her life. Now he was ready to save the entire town. But could the two of them, along with an elderly sheriff and whatever townsmen were brave enough to stay, really stand against 10 outlaws? We need help, she said. We need more guns, more people who know how to use them. I know some people, Jake said. Old friends from my time working cattle drives. They're not outlaws, but they're not afraid of a fight either. If I can get word to them, they might reach us before Cole does. That's a big if, Sheriff Carter pointed out. It's the only if we've got, Jake replied. Part 4, Jake wrote 3 letters in careful handwriting and gave them to the fastest riders in town. Each letter went to a different cattle ranch within 50 miles, each addressed to men Jake had worked with before he settled in Arizona, men he trusted, men who owed him favors. Will they come? Katie asked as they watched the riders disappear into the gathering dusk. Sam Burke will come, Jake said confidently. I pulled him out of a stampede 5 years ago. Saved his life. He's foreman at the Triple Bar Ranch now, has 30 men under him. If he can spare even 5 or 6, that will help. And the others? Danny Watts is wild but loyal. If he's between jobs, he'll ride just for the excitement. And Frank Moss, well, Frank likes a good fight, and he's always hated outlaws. His sister was killed by bandits 10 years back. He might bring his brothers. Katie nodded slowly. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It reminded her of the fire that had consumed her store, the fire Dutch Morgan had set. Somewhere out there, Dutch was wounded and running. And somewhere else, his brother Cole was preparing to ride into town with 10 armed men. We should rest, Jake said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But sleep did not come easily that night. Katie lay awake in the hotel room, listening to Jake's steady breathing beside her. She had moved past propriety and reputation, sharing a room with him openly. When you faced death together, certain social conventions seemed less important. Morning arrived too quickly. The town was mostly empty now. The women and children had left in wagons during the night, along with the elderly and infirm. Only about 15 men remained, mostly shopkeepers and ranch hands who refused to abandon their homes. Sheriff Carter was organizing them into defensive positions. We'll use the bank as our stronghold, Jake explained, pointing at a map he had drawn of the main street. It's brick, so it won't burn easily. The general store across the street is gone, which gives us a clear field of fire. We'll put men on the roofs of the hotel and the courthouse, and we'll barricade the ends of the street. What about escape routes? Katie asked. If things go badly, we need a way out. The alley behind the bank leads to the stables, Jake said. We'll keep horses ready there. If we have to run, we run together, and we run fast. By noon, the barricades were in place, and the men were positioned. Katie had claimed a rifle and a spot on the hotel roof, giving her a high vantage point over the entire street. Jake wanted her in the bank, protected, but she had refused. She had earned her place in this fight. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert air hot and still. Sweat ran down Katie's back as she scanned the horizon for any sign of riders. Beside her, old Henry Mills, the blacksmith, checked his shotgun for the 10th time. Never thought I'd be doing this at my age, Henry muttered. Figured I'd die in my shop, surrounded by horseshoes and anvils. We're not dying today, Katie said firmly. Jake won't let that happen. Jake's won't let that happen, Jake's one man, Henry pointed out. A good man, but still just one man. A shout from the street below made Katie's heart jump. Sheriff Carter was pointing north, where a cloud of dust was rising on the horizon. Riders, multiple riders. Coming fast! Here they come! Jake called out. Everyone ready. Don't fire until I give the signal. Katie raised her rifle and squinted against the sun. She could make out individual riders now. 10 men, just as Pete had said. They rode in a loose formation, confident and unafraid. They did not know they were riding into a trap. The riders entered town and slowed to a walk, their horses' hooves echoing on the empty street. The man in front was big, bigger than Dutch, with a thick black beard and cold eyes. Cole Morgan. He had to be. Where is everyone? Cole called out, his voice booming. Dutch said this was a thriving town. Looks dead to me. It's a trap, one of his men said nervously. We should leave. Shut up, Cole snapped. Dutch is here somewhere. We'll find him, and then we'll find out what happened. Jake stepped out of the bank, his hands empty and visible. Dutch isn't here. He ran like a coward yesterday after he failed to kill an unarmed woman. Cole's eyes narrowed.
Who are you? Jake Cooper, the man your brother tried to murder in Billings.
The man whose fiancée Dutch tried to burn alive. The man who's going to give you one chance to turn around and ride out of here peacefully. Cole laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the buildings. One man giving orders to 10? You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you're also stupid. Kill 'em, boys. The outlaws reached for their guns. Jake dove behind a water trough as the shooting started. Katie fired from her roof position, her first shot taking one of Cole's men out of his saddle. Henry fired too, his shotgun blast catching another outlaw in the chest. The street erupted into chaos. The outlaws scattered, seeking cover behind horses and buildings. Return fire peppered the hotel roof, forcing Katie to duck low. She could hear bullets slamming into the brick walls of the bank, could hear men shouting and horses screaming. Jake was pinned down behind the water trough, unable to move without exposing himself to multiple angles of fire. Sheriff Carter tried to provide covering fire from the courthouse window, but he was an old man with shaking hands. His shots went wide. We're outnumbered, Henry said urgently. Jake's plan isn't working. Katie's mind raced. They had expected the outlaws to charge straight in, giving the hidden defenders a clear advantage. But Cole was smarter than Dutch. He had pulled his men back and was using cover effectively. They were in a standoff, and a standoff favored the outlaws, who had more men and ammunition. Then Katie heard it. The thunder of more hooves. More riders coming fast from the south. Her heart sank. Reinforcements for Cole. They were finished, but the voice that rang out was familiar. Jake Cooper, you old dog. Couldn't stay out of trouble if your life depended on it. Sam Burke. He had come. And he had not come alone. Katie counted 12 riders, all armed, all wearing the grim expressions of men ready for a fight. The outlaws saw them too. Cole's confidence wavered. He had 10 men against roughly 20 now, and half his men were already spooked. Last chance, Cole, Jake shouted. Leave now or stay here permanently. Your choice. Cole made his choice. He spurred his horse and charged directly at Jake's position, firing both revolvers. His men followed, some reluctantly, but they followed. It was a desperate move, an all-or-nothing gamble. Sam Burke's men met them in the middle of the street. The impact was like thunder. Horses collided, men grappled, guns fired at point-blank range. Katie could not get a clear shot without risking hitting one of their own men. She watched in horror as the melee unfolded below. Jake emerged from behind the water trough and ran straight at Cole. The outlaw leader saw him coming and turned his horse, but Jake was faster. He grabbed Cole's leg and pulled him from the saddle. Both men hit the ground hard. Part 5. Cole came up swinging a knife he had pulled from his boot. The blade slashed across Jake's forearm, drawing blood. Jake kicked Cole's knee, buckling the bigger man's leg, then drove his fist into Cole's face. The outlaw's head snapped back and he fell hard, his knife skittering across the dirt. Around them, the fight was turning. Burke's men were professional ranch hands, tough men used to hard work in harder situations. They fought with precision and purpose. The outlaws, for all their bluster and violence, were starting to break. 2 of Cole's men threw down their weapons and raised their hands. A third tried to flee and was tackled off his horse by one of Sam's cowboys. A fourth took a bullet and fell, not moving. The rest were either dead, wounded, or surrendering. Cole struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. He lunged at Jake again, but Jake sidestepped and brought the butt of his revolver down on the back of Cole's head. The outlaw collapsed in the dirt and did not get up. Katie climbed down from the hotel roof and ran to Jake. His arm was bleeding badly from Cole's knife wound, but he was alive. He was standing. They had won. You took your time getting here, Jake said to Sam Burke, who was tying up prisoners with practiced efficiency. Would have been here yesterday, but one of my horses threw a shoe, Sam replied with a grin. Besides, looked like you had it under control. We were 10 seconds from being overrun, Jake admitted. But you weren't, Sam said. That's what counts. Sheriff Carter emerged from the courthouse looking dazed. The entire fight had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it had felt like hours.
Bodies lay in the street. Wounded men groaned.
The horses were still spooked, dancing nervously away from the smell of blood. What do we do with all these prisoners? The sheriff asked, gesturing at the 6 outlaws who had surrendered. Send them to the territorial marshal in Silver Creek, Jake said. Let them stand trial for everything they've done. Pete already agreed to testify. These men will hang. Katie wrapped Jake's arm with a strip of cloth torn from her skirt, trying to stop the bleeding. You need a doctor. I've had worse, Jake said, but he leaned on her heavily. The adrenaline was wearing off and the pain was setting in. Sam's men helped clean up the town. They gathered the bodies, tended the wounded, and restored some sense of order. By evening, the prisoners were loaded into a wagon bound for Silver Creek, guarded by 4 of Sam's best men. The rest of Sam's crew prepared to ride back to the Triple Bar Ranch. You're welcome to come with us, Sam offered. The ranch always needs good hands, and after what I saw today, you two can handle yourselves. Jake looked at Katie. What do you think? Your store is gone. There's nothing keeping us here. Katie looked around at the town she had called home for 3 years, the burned remains of her store, the bullet-scarred buildings, the blood-stained street. But she also saw the townspeople starting to return. She saw children running down the street happy to be home. She saw hope. I think we rebuild, she said firmly. Dutch and Cole Morgan tried to destroy this town, tried to destroy us. If we leave, they win. Even dead or imprisoned, they win. But if we stay and rebuild, if we show that we're stronger than their hate and violence, then we win. Jake smiled and pulled her close, careful of his wounded arm. Then we rebuild. We'll build a new store, bigger than the old one. We'll build a house, start a family. We'll make this town something worth fighting for. You really want to settle down here? Sam asked skeptically. After everything that's happened? This is home, Jake said simply. Katie's here. That makes it home. Sam shook his head but smiled. You always were stubborn. All right, when you're ready to build that new store, send word. I'll bring my crew and we'll have it up in a week. I'll hold you to that, Jake said. They watched Sam and his men ride out, their horses kicking up dust in the fading light. Sheriff Carter approached with 2 telegrams in his hand. These just came through, he said. First one's from the territorial marshal. He's sending deputies to collect the prisoners and investigate what happened here. Second one's from a bank in Denver. Jake took the second telegram and read it, his eyebrows rising. It's about Dutch Morgan. Apparently there's a $5,000 reward for his capture. Dead or alive. He's not dead, Katie pointed out. He got away. But we know where he's headed, Jake said thoughtfully. He's wounded, running scared, and he'll need medical attention. There are only 3 towns within 2 days' ride that have doctors. I could track him down. No, Katie said firmly. Let the law handle Dutch. You've done enough. We've both done enough. Jake looked at the telegram for a long moment, then slowly tore it in half. You're right. $5,000 would be nice, but it's not worth leaving you again. Not worth risking what we have. That night, they stood on the hotel balcony and watched the stars come out. The town was quiet now, peaceful. The violence of the past 2 days seemed almost unreal. Do you regret any of it? Jake asked quietly. Do you wish you had never met me? Never gotten mixed up in this mess? Katie thought about it, really thought about it. She had lost her store. She had killed men. She had faced death and barely escaped. Her life had been turned upside down in ways she could never have imagined. I don't regret a single moment, she said finally. Because every moment, good and bad, led me here. Led me to standing beside you, alive and whole. That's worth everything I lost. Jake kissed her forehead. We'll get married as soon as the preacher comes back. No more waiting, no more delays. I want you as my wife before anything else can happen. Yes, Katie said, laughing. Yes to all of it. Yes to the marriage. Yes to the new store. Yes to the life we're going to build here. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Sam Burke returned with his crew and they built a new general store in 6 days. It was larger than the old one, with better shelves and a proper counter. The townspeople donated supplies to help Katie restock. Mrs. Patterson gave her fabric and thread. Henry Mills forged new hinges and locks. Even Sheriff Carter contributed, building display cases in his spare time. Jake worked alongside them, his arm healing slowly but surely. He moved carefully, still favoring his left side where Dutch's bullets had nearly killed him, but he was getting stronger every day. Katie caught him smiling more often, the shadows in his eyes gradually fading. The territorial marshal came and went, taking statements and investigating the shootout. He praised their courage and promised that Cole Morgan would hang for his crimes. Dutch was still at large, but there were wanted posters in every town from Arizona to Montana. Someone would catch him eventually. The wedding took place on a Sunday morning in late autumn. The whole town attended, grateful to celebrate something joyful after all the violence and fear. Katie wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had sewn. Jake wore a new suit that he could barely afford but insisted on buying. They spoke their vows in the small church, promising to love and protect each other for the rest of their lives. "I thought you were gone," Katie whispered during their first dance at the reception. "I thought I had lost you forever." "I came back for you," Jake said, holding her close. "I'll always come back for you. Nothing could keep me away." And he was right. 3 months later, when word came that Dutch Morgan had been spotted near the border, Jake did not even consider going after him. He stayed with Katie, helping her run the store, building their life together. The reward money did not matter. The revenge did not matter. What mattered was the woman in his arms and the future they were creating. Dutch Morgan was eventually caught by a Texas Ranger and hanged for murder. The news reached Jake and Katie on a quiet spring morning. Jake read the telegram, nodded once, and then tossed it in the fire. That chapter of their lives was over. They stood together on the porch of their new house, watching the sun rise over the desert. Katie's hand rested on her growing belly, their first child due in the summer. Jake's arm was around her shoulders, holding her close. "We made it," Katie said softly. "Through everything, we made it." "We did more than that," Jake replied. "We won. We built something real, something lasting. Dutch and Cole tried to destroy us, but they just made us stronger." Katie leaned into him, feeling safe and loved and complete. She had thought he was gone, had believed she would spend the rest of her life alone, but he had returned for her, had fought for her, had chosen her over revenge and reward money. That was worth more than anything Dutch Morgan could have taken from them. In the distance, the town was waking up. Smoke rose from chimneys, children played in the streets. The general store would open soon, and Katie would need to go tend to the customers, but for now, in this moment, she and Jake simply stood together and watched the new day begin. They had survived. They had won. And most importantly, they had each other. That was all that mattered.
That was everything.